I am Liz Powell. I'm the head of G2G Consulting, and my role is really just to kick things off. I want to start with a question. What does Luke Skywalker, who lost his arm in Star Wars, have in common with anyone who has a lost limb today or in the near future? More than you know, that's what you're going to find out today. We are so close to bringing that same force from Star Wars to our warfighters, our veterans, and all who have lost a limb. So today we've brought together amazing experts who are going to share what's happening with this technology and how it's impacting all of us. It's really exciting. And it's not just for those with lost limbs, it's for those who are serving our military now using exoskeletons, so many different technologies that will enhance our capabilities. So, without further ado, I would love to introduce our moderator today, who is Wendy Wang. She's Chief Operations Officer at BIOS. She's co-founder who took two novel life-saving therapies to market. She served in senior role at Boston Consulting Group and many other companies, and she's a veteran of digital health startups and top-tier life sciences companies. So, with that, I would love to pass to Wendy.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Liz. As Liz mentioned, we are very excited to talk to you today about the innovation that Jake George and Dr. Chris Duncan have started originally with DARPA, with the focus on wounded warriors and facilitating the return to military service, specifically for technologies that enable precision control with sensory feedback. So typically today, for users of prosthesis, they can open and close to grasp things. What's more difficult and not possible today is individual dexterity with multiple degrees of freedom, where you also feel sensation at the same time. And the reason this is extremely important is that it supports our targeted strategic areas of needs, specifically one, as Liz mentioned, the opportunity to allow wounded warfighters to continue to serve. And secondly, to help exoskeletons on soldiers actually increase the reaction time. So it's on par with human movement, increasing their warfighting capabilities. So to learn more about this research, let's begin by hearing more from our panelists. We'll start with Dr. Chris Duncan, who's Chief Medical Officer of BIOS, and then also hear from Dr. Jake George, who's the Chief Scientist. I will turn it over to Chris, who will tell us more about his role in the research and why this research is important to him.
Good morning. I'm grateful to be joining you today. My name is Chris Duncan. I'm a physical medicine and rehabilitation physician that subspecializes in restoration of impaired mobility, like limb loss, paralysis, and brain injury. Throughout my medical training at the University of Utah and early career, it was clear that we stood on the cusp of restoring mobility to patients through novel therapeutic interventions. But it was also clear that we weren't there yet, that we couldn't employ mid-century technologies for 21st century problems. And it was also clear that it wasn't going to happen alone. To that end, I joined the Utah Neurorobotics Lab in 2013. I was principally responsible for recruitment and management of clinical trial participants for the original University of Utah DARPA haptics program. And gratefully, I am now Chief Medical Officer for BIOS, where we intend to finish the work we started and to make sure that we can deliver on these novel therapeutic breakthroughs for real patients throughout the United States that so desperately need it. Jake?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here today. My name is Jacob George. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Utah and director of the Utah Neurorobotics Lab. And today I'm really excited to talk to you guys about something that I've been working on for about a decade now. And as a biomedical engineer by training, I now work between the intersection of engineering and medicine, and really have been trying to pioneer this idea of turning, Luke Skywalker's bionic arm from science fiction into reality. And I'll pass it back over to Wendy.
Great. Thanks, Jake and Chris. With that, Jake, why don't we kick off with you and tell us a little bit about how this research started with DARPA and how this technology works?
Sure. Yeah, excited to. So I'll start with this image that I think many of us have recognized. Of all the different technologies in the Star Wars universe, I think one of the most impressive technologies is Luke Skywalker's bionic arm. And so, as a reminder, there's only a few scenes earlier that Luke Skywalker loses his hand in a pretty epic lightsaber duel. But then, here we are just a few scenes later where it only takes a simple touches from this droid to make, Luke's hand as good as new. And what's really interesting is that his prosthetic hand is directly integrated to his nervous system so that he can control it with simple thoughts and even get a sense of touch coming back from it. And the hand is integrated so perfectly that it's actually hard to tell which hand is real and which hand isn't. Um, and this Star Wars technology is actually in direct contrast with the current standard of care, which looks a lot more like this. So if you lost your hand tomorrow, you'd likely be given a body power hook, which is no joke, the same exact technology, more or less, that's been used since the American Civil War. Alternatively, you could be given a cosmetic hand that might look more realistic, but then would provide, no functionality at all. And then in recent years, there's been this development of these multi-articulate bionic arms. And these arms are really capable of actually recreating almost all of the grip patterns of the natural human hand. But controlling these fancy new bionic arms is not an easy or an intuitive task. So if you were to buy an arm like that today, you would have to control it using tilt switches on your feet, like in this video. So one foot actually toggles between a menu of grip patterns, and the other foot actually initiates the movement. And yes, this actually means you cannot walk and use your arms at the same time. So as a result of these limitations, somewhere between 50 to 70% of upper limb amputees will actually abandon their prostheses and never use them again. And they often report a lack of control and a lack of sensation as these primary reasons. So just take a minute to kind of, imagine that you've woken up in the hospital to find out that both of your hands have been amputated. How would you go about your daily life? I mean, how do you hold a fork and feed yourself? How would you tie your shoes in the morning? How would you play catch with your kid? But more importantly, how would you feel? Like physically, the world that's around you, but also emotionally, how would you feel as a whole individual? And so, as put by one of the amputee participants that we've worked with, they said losing a limb is like losing a family member, except you're reminded of it every single day. And in the United States alone, we have 1.6 million individuals that suffer from limb loss, and that's nearly 1 in every 200 people. And the symptoms include not just functional disability, but also chronic pain, depression, and anxiety. And so today we're going to be talking about, our advances to turn this idea of Luke Skywalker's bionic arm from science fiction dream into a real world healthcare solution so that individuals can control these multi-articulate bionic arms entirely by thought and even get a sense of touch coming back from the device to allow them to have a delicate touch. And we're not really talking about the physical hand, and we're not really talking about, an implantable device, but we're really talking about this technological concept of extracting information from the nervous system to control the device, and the concept of providing information back to the nervous system to restore a sense of touch. And so it's really this input-output system that's really kind of the unique core of this technology that we're going to be talking about today. And this is this brain-computer interface that allows, the idea of Luke Skywalker's bionic arm to become real. And so this technology has now been around for a while, and it's been some of the work that we've been doing in this space has been picked up by over 958 different media outlets, highlighting all the different technologies and the new impact that's coming from this. So this is something that's been going on for quite a while now. So how does this technology actually work? Well, controlling a bionic arm with your thoughts might sound like science fiction, but it's actually possible. We're all controlling our own arms right now with our thoughts. And so when we think about moving our hand, information starts in the form of an electrical signal in our brain, and then it moves down towards our hand. And so even after you lose your hand, those electrical signals still come down from your brain to your arm, except there's no hand to move. So the question is, well, what if we could tap into those naturally occurring signals and then use them to control a bionic arm? So to do that, to restore this motor control, we actually implant a device into the peripheral arm nerves of an individual after they've lost their hand. We also implant a array into the muscles. And so this device goes into the muscles of the residual limb. And then from there, when a person thinks about an action, such as moving their hand, that information starts in their brain, is transmitted down to these devices where we can pick up those signals, amplify them, and then use an AI algorithm to translate them into the intuitive and dexterous movement of a robotic arm. And so we now have this bionic arm that's controlled intuitively just by thought. And so what could be better than that, you might ask? Well, what if we told you that that same implanted device and that same bionic arm could be used to restore a natural sense of touch to an individual? And so in this case, when the prosthetic hand makes contact with an object, like a grape here, we can convert the mechanical forces on the hand into electrical stimulation of the nerves, which then sends information back up the existing biological pathway so that the individual feels a sense of touch as if it was coming from their missing hand. And then comes the really fun part, which is we can tie the motor control and the sense of touch together to create this closed loop system where your motor actions actually influence your sensory perception and your sensory feedback actually influences your motor control. And with this bidirectional system, we're really kind of replacing what normally would be seen as a prosthetic hand with something that an individual feels is their own hand. And so far, we've been able to demonstrate that the system allows individuals to effortlessly perform daily tasks, including manipulating delicate objects without breaking them and identifying objects by touch. What's even cooler is that this system has been shown to reduce chronic pain and that this system is viable long term. But best of all is that a holistic system like this can create a sense of embodiment, which is this feeling that a bionic hand starts to become a part of your own body and not just a tool. So what does this concept of embodiment look like? Well, to explain this point, I just want to show a quick video highlighting one of our participants' reactions to this combination of motor control and sensory feedback. And so in this video, participant's going to be controlling a virtual hand and interacting with this virtual door. And so, he thinks about moving the hand and the hand moves. And when he touches the door, he's going to feel sensations coming from his missing hand. But what's interesting is that he's actually felt these sensations before and he's moved the hand before, but this is the first time that he's going to experience these two together in unison. So it's that combination. And what you'll see is that, by integrating the motor control with this tactile and visual feedback, suddenly the participant gets a completely different experience than ever before. And so he begins to embody the prosthesis. So as he reaches out and touches the door, all of a sudden his hand becomes alive. And he's able to feel again for the first time in 24 years.
Is it causing it to contract?
Maybe.
Oh my god, I just felt that roar. Oh yeah.
Can you feel the fingers sliding when you do that?
Yeah, actually I can. I get it on there. God, that is so cool.
So I think the choice of words here is also important. He doesn't say, I felt something on my missing hand. Instead, he says, oh my God, I just felt that door. And it's that combination of the motor control and that sense of touch that creates a much more immersive and a much more enjoyable experience. And so as another example of embodiment, we had one of our more recent participants controlling a sensorized 3D printed prosthetic hand. And after using it for some time, one of us asks them, is there anything that you want to grab or hold? And he responded by saying, I want to clasp my hands together.
Is there anything you want to grasp that you see?
I want to clasp my hands together.
You can clasp your hands together if you want. Go ahead.
So again, just notice the choice of words here. He says, I want to clasp my hands together. Before, this was just a prosthetic tool that was helping him accomplish a task, but now all of a sudden it's equivalent to the hand that he lost 13 years ago. And if there's anything better than feeling your own hand again after 13 years, it's feeling the hand of a loved one. And pictured here is our participant's first opportunity to hold hands with his wife and to feel her touch, once again. And so with that, I'll actually transition it back over to Chris Duncan, who will tell us a little bit more about some of the patients that we've worked with and some of the patient experiences from his side.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jake. So working with his patients is transformative. Hopefully you've been able to see in the same epiphanies that they have about touching the virtual door or about touching his own hand, the credible reality that it is to have a new hand. Um, Gentleman pictured here is Kevin. He is a realtor by trade and a bishop by choice, an excellent man and an excellent husband who developed totally newfound skills after becoming a research participant with us. And I think it's opened new doors into what he foresees as possible for his future and has brought him out into the community like he never was. Um, we're going to introduce a video that was featured this year in the Super Bowl on Fox 13, and um, this patient is very special to me. He came to me while we were at the VA in Salt Lake City with an incurable chronic pain syndrome of the hand, which had become unusable to him. And after a full discussion of treatment options, he elected for a pioneering effort to amputate the hand that was non-functional and to undergo implantation of nerve and muscle arrays, which then would allow him to control the state-of-the-art investigational device, our Utah slanted electrode array. Um, let's let the video speak for himself. You'll see quickly that he's a charismatic personality.
The warriors, the builders and believers.
If you were watching the Super Bowl last week, you may have seen these shots of a bionic arm as part of a piece narrated by actor Brad Pitt called What It Means to Be American. What you probably didn't know is that it's a real bionic arm being developed at the University of Utah. Fox 13 News reporter Spencer Joseph explains how this science fiction is becoming science fact in this installment of Uniquely Utah.
Perry Mason Pezzarosi is like many Americans who served his country valiantly, and unfortunately, like too many of them, had an injury.
So I had a service-connected injury, which eventually led to my amputation. So everyone told me once you have the amputation, it's gonna hurt you, it's gonna bother you, and it's fine. Until the day they unwrapped it and I saw it for the first time, and that was in August of 2017.
But the question was, what was next?
The doctor recommended I look around and see what science was out there to find the best prosthetic that would fit for me.
So all the way from Mississippi, he found the University of Utah and a program called the Luke Arm.
I never dreamed that there would be a day where I would have a prosthetic hand where the fingers articulated, the wrist pronate, supinate, flex, extend.
After a lot of testing and work.
So this is my Luke Arm. This was what was made out of all the studies, and this is what came to life for me. So I pop it on, we attach the boa, and there it is. Now I'm a real person.
And the first time he was able to use it?
Oh, I cried like a baby, for real. Because, I mean, I had never seen anything like this. I didn't know it was real, because at the time it really wasn't real, except in a lab setting.
Did you get it? And we didn't drop it.
There you go.
Since then, it's gone from learning basic skills
I can do this, it'll be a miracle.
to feeling like his own.
So this is my arm.
That's crazy.
It just looks different than yours.
But it looks cooler.
Maybe.
But it does come with a lot of questions.
What is it? Where did you get it? Is it real? That's a lot of the biggest question is, how does it work? And that's when I need Jake on my side to explain it, because I'm not smart enough.
That's right.
Yeah, so honestly, this technology has been in works for quite a long time at the University of Utah. Predates me and even those that predated me.
Jacob George is the director of the Utah Neurorobotics Lab.
I've been working on this in one way or another since about 2015, so almost a decade now of time where I've been developing and building this technology.
And together with this team, they've made this tech a reality. So I had to try it. Using a motion scanner, I was able to control the hand, and it followed my every move. That is so cool.
And what started as, science fiction is now very much a reality.
But what the University of Utah has done, which is so amazing, is blend existing technologies, like this hand itself and the implants used, to create something extraordinary.
With our system, we have an implanted device that allows the person to then, simply think about moving their hand and it moves with their thoughts. And what's better than a bionic arm controlled by thoughts? Well, that same arm can actually give a person a sense of touch coming back.
Yep. You heard that right. Not only can this arm be controlled with your thoughts, but you can actually feel things with it too.
So when they make contact with an object, the forces on that hand get translated into stimulation of their nerve, which then causes them to feel a sensation as if it was coming from their missing limb.
Other applications are on the horizon, like creating exoskeletons for stroke patients and putting some of the same tech in the size of a smartwatch, with students and faculty working towards helping people.
The first reactions that we've seen from patients are always the most inspiring for our work.
To use that to help people, regain their independence, to improve their quality of life is just really satisfying.
We've had a lot of people just wanting to come back, wanting to try the device over and over again.
The work that I'm doing, I know, is going to really actually affect people's lives.
So what's next?
The device recently got a breakthrough device designation, which is basically a fast track to bring this to the market.
All thanks to those like Perry, who were brave enough and pioneered using this device, even using his journey as inspiration to start his own foundation called the First Responder Family Fund.
I mean, I've always wanted to help people. Obviously, I let them chop off my arm and put in 330-something implants. So if there's someone, an advocate, that can talk to you, educate you, teach you, and just keep you in the right mental state, as long as you don't give up, there's always hope.
So when the next service member has an injury like his, that hope can bring them through.
I mean, it really hit you, because that was the goal. I'm old, broke down, so it's only going to help me so much for so long. But for some of the younger people, I mean, it will change their life. It absolutely will change their life.
Spencer Joseph, Fox 13 News, Utah.
Thank you. What an impressive video. Like Jake mentioned, this is a generational effort, and now we're at the confluence of AI, robotics, and neuroscience that made these breakthroughs possible. And now what we hope to do is make breakthrough adoption achievable at scale, in real patients, in real lives. As it was best put by one of our subjects, soon it'll just like Luke Skywalker, then everyone will want one. It's immediately evident on looking on the faces of these individuals that the technology is valuable, worth it, and it represents their own hands. The sci-fi technology behind Luke Skywalker's bionic arm is a blueprint for interfacing with the human nervous system. The brain-computer interface technology allows us to unlock our true potential. Using this technology, we can imagine all the available uses. Not only can we create more dexterous and lifelike prosthetics, as indicated already in the videos, these are tools by which we can extend ourselves and project our volition at distance or through various digital mediums. In these examples, we could touch and feel virtual and augmented reality environments. We could allow individuals to seamlessly act dexterously with smart technology around the home, whether that's to allow individuals to live independently who previously suffered from disability, or to extend the performance envelope of warfighters in the battlefield. This technology paves the way for a world in which it can become more inclusive, to allow everyone, regardless of impairment, to return to full performance, regardless of their physical capabilities. In doing so, we can also rewrite the nervous system to rehabilitate and reanimate paralyzed limbs. This is Jake working with a subject to demonstrate the strength of exoskeletons using this AI technology. So the same mechanism by which we learn to record movement, we can enhance and augment impaired movement in the forearm and the hand, and improve strength, speed, and endurance of performance, allowing people to get back to doing tasks of daily living, to reduce care burden on the society, and to to allow them a fuller, richer life. In the in in the in a combat situation, our AI neurotechnology bridges mind and machine. It increases the reaction time for soldiers and exoskeletons, as Wendy mentioned, so it is on par with human movement, but with both greater power and endurance, which can enhance lethality and warfighting capabilities. We want our soldiers in the field longer, stronger, and faster. Our AI neurotechnology could allow previously injured warfighters to return to effective, meaningful service, retooled as drone operators or robotic bomb technicians, for example, or to operate in previously inaccessible, inhospitable environments such as underwater welding through telepresence robotics with dexterous feel and control. It would allow our armed forces the ability to extend existing personnel, such as frontline robotic surgeons, operating at a safe distance, although delivering care on the front line, using, again, naturalistic touch and feel. Um, our AI neurotechnology bridges mind and machine. Increase this next clip is an impressive clip of a patient I got to know well. His name is Brian McKenna. And he was an enterprising young man that approached me in the clinic who was skilled in pattern recognition from working at Goldman Sachs. He was injured with a severed spinal cord injury high in the mid neck, resulting in complete paralysis in the arms, trunk, and lower legs. He felt that his life's mission was to work with us in research to restore the ability to move again. And we use this same technology that Jake developed to understand the residual motor control, electrical control signals in the neck and transpose them into reasonable movement for exoskeletons and for robotic hands to enhance his life. I'd like to show you what he thought of it.
I'm more excited about this than honestly anything that's happened since I broke my neck.
He recognizes immediately, just as in the previous video.
Just imagine anything.
He recognizes in this, just like in the previous videos, those personal epiphanies that to him are paradigm shifts in his interpretation of his world and what is possible. 10 degrees of freedom means simultaneous proportional control of 10 joints at once in an exoskeleton. That means walking naturally. That means using the arms and the legs simultaneously, again, to reduce disability burden at home or to enhance the performance envelope of anybody still in the battlefield. The possibilities are truly endless. If you can imagine it, we'll bring this sci-fi technology that we've developed at the University of Utah Neurorobotics Lab from science fiction back into reality. We'd love to do that. I'll turn it back over to Jake.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so I'll just, like to again highlight, all the people who've made this possible, which includes a ton of different government agencies, universities across all over the United States, as well as many industry partners who are helping make this possible. And there's a huge research team of individuals as well who've made this possible, as well as most importantly, all the patients that we've worked with who dedicate their time and their bodies to make this technology better for the next generation as well. And so with that, I'd like to thank you guys for listening, and I'll turn it back over to Wendy to field any questions.
Hi, Jake and Chris. Thank you so much for that overview of how this technology works and how this changes lives. Chris, question for you. One thing that you mentioned during your description of working with Brian and others was decreasing the disability and burden at home. What does that really look like? What does that mean in the home setting?
Oh, great. Thank you, Wendy. To use Brian as an example, right? One person with paralysis goes from working as a high-level analyst at Goldman Sachs, right, to experiencing life essentially from a mobile powered wheelchair or a bed in which he needs an assistant to at least one more person to assist him in the morning and another person usually at night to assist him. So that's three people's full-time employment right there, or contribution, limiting the potential of at scale of society to really move forward with independence. If we could contract the amount of dependence on others using these technologies, we can do so much more with the same workforce. That is the hope. And beyond that, it speaks nothing of the opportunity cost of that one individual working back to full work, back to full life, back to raising kids and re-engaging with their community and however they feel suits them.
I think one thing you had reminded me in the past was how women think about this also differently, right? And the use of their hands in not only work settings, but in the home setting. Could you talk a little bit about that as well?
Absolutely. In fact, I may just bring up another reference to a patient, which would tell more powerful stories. Um, I had an amazing patient who came to me who was on her way to the hospital working as an OBGYN, who flipped her Ford Explorer and lost both of her arms in a motor vehicle accident. It was tragic. It was the end of what she saw as her life's work again as a surgeon. Yet, in a wrinkle, she was a new mother and she needed to return to duties. She could put off the duties of returning to work as an OBGYN, right? She could rely on disability and on her husband and other things to kind of make up for that vocational gap. Never mind the depression and disability. But she couldn't leave her 2-year-old daughter unattended, and she had to be a mom for her still. So historically, as Jake alluded to, using hooks that were steel and cold were unacceptable to her to be able to change her daughter's diaper, often pinching her on the skin, and then, not being able to offer, a sense of reassuring affective touch, with, a gentle pat on the head or a gentle hug around the shoulders. And she came to me in tears looking for better solutions that would meet those needs first as a mother, second as a wife, and third, hopefully getting back to the surgical operating field. And we explored those in depth, and she came to our lab and she was in tears by the end again, but these are joyful tears, knowing that a future looks brighter and can she can live again. Simply put.
That's incredible. It's amazing. So why now? Why is this the right time to pursue this technology and get this to the finish line?
I mean, it's clear we sit at a nexus of neurotechnology, of fabrication potential, and most importantly, AI. AI is moving rapidly in this domain, and we have the capability to naturalistically extract motor control signals and then redeliver sensory inputs. It's possible. It's technologically possible. It's feasible, and I think our society, as shown by kind of the global visions of imagining the Luke Skywalker hand, we all know where we want to go. We're finally there. I think the technology is sufficiently mature. It's robust. The implants last. The interfaces stay online, and the robotic hands can be improved from here on out. I think that we would do everybody a disservice if we did not capitalize on this. And we know that the competitors in China and Europe are not yet to our level of capability. And if we move quickly, we can be the world leader in this. Continue to be the world leader in this. Yeah.
And Jake, have you seen a similar thing, being in the AI space and robotics and neurotech for such a long time? How do you feel about where the competitors are relative to us, whether they be in other countries or within the US?
Yeah, so I would say that there's quite a few different individuals and groups working on this across the world. There's definitely big players in China right now as well, in Europe and the US. I would say these are kind of the predominant areas. In the US, I think we've been leading this in multiple fronts, developing this technology, getting it out in front. And And I think we've invested a lot, right? I mean, this started back in like 2009, even with some of these DARPA funded initiatives about, giving a hand back to the veteran or the soldier that gave their, hand for the country. And we've come a long way. Like we started by creating these multi-articulate bionic arms that could replicate the motion of a human hand. And then we realized, oh crap, like what's next? We can't control these things. And so now we're going to the next stage, which is, to demonstrate that we can, actually then allow a person to control these things seamlessly with their thoughts. And so at this point, we've basically matured the technology and we've done this with a lot of government support. So now the next step will be to actually bring these things to market. And I do think in the next, 10 years, this will be very much a reality. And in terms of the different types of these technologies that exist, I think there's, maybe, a couple of different pathways. Like there's other companies that are looking at implanting devices in the brain. There's opportunities that we've talked about today about implanting them in the peripheral nerves. And then there's also opportunities to do things, non-invasively through the surface of the skin. And each of these have, their different advantages and disadvantages. But I will start by saying that in the brain, it's very complicated to figure out like what is the actual communication language that we should operate on to make this technology work. Whereas if we put these things on the peripheral nerves, it's much more simple input output, and we actually can understand it. So the one other quote I love to say is that, we've had a patient who came to us and was working with us. And when we asked them about, in being engaged in the study, they said, sure, go ahead and implant the device in my arm. I'm not using my arm anyway. And I don't think anyone would say the same thing about their brain, right? So being in the arm nerves and things like that has its own competitive advantage as well. And then, relative to the non-invasive strategies right now, these implanted devices allow us to have much higher fidelity, much higher precision, which means that we can have, faster than physical movement latency. Like we can truly understand what a person's trying to do before their body even reacts. So like now you're talking about a pilot that could fire a trigger, a nanosecond faster than someone else in a dogfight. And that could be the difference between life or death, right? And that same type of technology being implanted also provides us that precision to allow a person to have, the complete multi-articulate capabilities of their hands and that full rich sensory experience that is important for our dexterity and also our emotional capabilities as well.
So you had mentioned,
Wendy, may I
go
just
ahead.
tag
Yeah,
to
of course.
that? Jake brings up an excellent example about why do we implant these in the peripheral nerves versus in the brain. The brain is a confined space. It's an immune protected space. It's prone to infection. Neurons there are delicate, usually shielded from the external environment. Anytime we put anything invasive in the brain, it results in neuronal death and destruction of the tissue in which the interface was implanted. In direct and very applicable contrast to that, the peripheral nervous system, to use the metaphor of a computer, is like a USB port, right, with a longer cable. It's the most naturalistic way to connect to the human nervous system. And to plug into the brain directly may have some advantages, but it's a destructive process and starts the time on obsolescence as we continue to march this technology forward.
Great. At this time, we have about 20 minutes left. I would love to hear from the audience. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type it into the chat box, and we will answer those as they come up. One thing I find really interesting is, as both you but Jake and Chris mentioned, is the peripheral nervous system. And in the videos that we've seen to date so far, and the illustrations that we've talked about, I've seen mostly upper limb. What about the lower limb and other parts? Jake, or Chris, do you want to say that?
I'll just lead and then I'll turn it over to Jake. But there are 1.6 million amputees in the United States, most of which are lower limb. And this technology has broad applicability to lower limb. In fact, it's more durable and robust than any brain-machine interface, direct central brain machine interface would ever be. And it would enhance the ability for people to walk at speed, to change cadences, to go upstairs, down, and move naturalistically. There's no reason that we could even supersede physiologic parameters or anatomical limitations. We could make legs longer. We could make them more powerful. We could make people jump higher. These are all within the reach of technology. Dick?
Yeah, I would just add that, and from a, I guess wounded, individual with a missing limb, one of the challenges that, these individuals face is that they fall, right? These prosthetics lead to a lot of falls. And a key piece of not being able to to hold yourself upright is lack of balance. And balance is heavily dependent on like what we're feeling, right? And so that sense of touch is a really critical piece as well. So beyond just like the latency and the speed and the power that a person can have, you also need to be able to have this delicate sense of touch to know where you're stepping and where your joints are in space so that you're not tripping. And so as we restore that sense of touch, we think about our hands having this really a delicate piece of touch, but also our feet have a critical sense of touch as well. And without that touch, we can lead to these critical injuries that are, falls, which is a predominant injury case in elderly and others as well. I'll pass it back to Wendy. I know there's a couple questions on the Q&A.
Yeah, so a couple of questions have been coming through. The first question is, do you see this technology being used beyond veterans with lost limbs to other health applications? And what is possible 10 years from now? Chris, do you want to start off? Kick us off with that?
Sure. So first and foremost, this is an ability to bridge impaired neuronal control of any disability. The framework that I like to use mostly is a brain injury that's either acquired in stroke or through trauma, like in a blast injury. We can so after a blast injury or a stroke, we find different parts of the body have limited movement, whether it's dexterity of the hand, whether it's strength of the hand, or whether it's the opposite muscles that don't allow it to open fully, the antagonistic muscle group. In stroke, we could use we have used and could use an array like ours to silence to clean up the signal that would go to the hand to allow a person to reclaim the ability to move the hand in stroke. We have also demonstrated that we can provide a virtual electric lidocaine, a numbing agent delivered electrically that can silence chronic pain. And that can be done in any nerve in the body, the arm, the leg, the back, anywhere. Which is a powerful technique which moves us away from drugs and leaves us with a cleaner head without the adverse cognitive side effects. This, as alluded to earlier, could restore paralysis. This could be one side of the bridge in restoring paralysis, which we're working towards. And the cumulative population numbers or epidemiology that this would impact would be tens of millions of people in a year. Jake, what do you think about the next 10 years?
Yeah, I would say, first and foremost, the technology from the prosthetic standpoint, I think within 10 years, very realistically, will be a device that patients will be able to have access to. I think that this will be on the market. This is something that people will be using in the real world. I think in 10 years, we will also be, as Chris mentioned, just exploring multitudes of new areas where this technology can then take shape. I think about this if we're familiar with like the idea of deep brain stimulation, you put this device in the brain, and originally we started using this as just like a one-off situation for like treating Parkinson's, and now it's being used to treat everything. And so there's tons and tons of people that are seeing these use cases. And I think of this as the same technology. It's going to come out, it's going to have this first indicated use in prosthetics, most likely, and then it's going to just start bridging into every domain of our lives. And it eventually will not only just be a medical device, but it'll be, a device that can be used for anyone, right? To enhance capabilities, to provide better interactions, more seamless interactions with technology, and really, bring our warfighters and, our citizens to much better qualities of life and much better capability.
Those are super exciting things to think about, right? And talk about making sci-fi a reality. So a question came through, which is a perfect segue, which is what is needed to scale this technology and to get widespread introduction and adoption?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. So I think there's a few different factors at play here. But I think, a lot of people would say by default that the biggest barrier for any medical device is going to be the FDA. But in reality, actually, I don't think that's the case. The FDA is very friendly and very supportive of new technologies, and they spend a lot of time working with companies through like things like breakthrough device designation, like and these this TAPS program, which allows them to kind of handhold companies through this process to help them get approved. They really do want these new technologies on the market. In contrast, I actually think the biggest challenge for a lot of these things is the reimbursement side. And so the reimbursement is the next valley after approval, which is how do you actually get these things to be paid? And when you start, with a new technology like this, it's unfortunately going to be expensive. We're talking about cutting edge technology, and it's going to be a difficult process to get these things paid when you're first starting out. But as they start to grow and scale, it's going to be like, computers or TVs or phones, where the technology becomes drastically cheaper as larger volumes are produced and things of that nature. But that initial reimbursement approval for these types of things, I think, is going to be one of the biggest challenges going forward. Another piece, I think, to this, to scale this technology widely, is just to make sure that we're engaging with the right stakeholders at all times, right? And so we've talked about patients and making sure patients and advocates are there to support this technology, making sure the companies are involved, and also making sure that representatives are, and our congressmen and all of these other different individuals are involved to help make this process, streamlined. And to that end, I'll just point out that one thing that's really promising coming forward is there's this new legislation that's being proposed, which would allow these breakthrough device designations technologies to have guaranteed reimbursement coverage, making them accessible to all Americans within, I think it's like 5-year time frame. So basically, as this technology gets approved, cutting edge breakthrough devices would be available for at least 5 years to demonstrate and allow them to scale. And I think that that's a really critical piece of legislation that will honestly have a very positive impact on our healthcare and our country.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more that ensuring patient coverage in the Breakthrough Products Act would be really significant for all medical devices and new innovative technologies coming forward, because reimbursement is a huge challenge. Another question that came through, and this is taking it back to the prosthesis, what is the latency like in terms of the user input to response from the prosthetic? Chris, do you want to take that question?
Sure, absolutely. So when we experience a delay, we established a human threshold at approximately 30 milliseconds. When we started out, we were right around that 30 millisecond mark working with Jake. We've now reduced it down to, I believe, 4 milliseconds. Jake, is that the state of the art with your lab? And those 4 milliseconds are imperceptible, like Jake alluded to. It's faster than we perceive we're doing it. It's almost better than a reflex. And that opens up so many doors in terms of, response times in life or death situations. It opens up the doors of, faster serial control of, either serial control of working, juggling one device to another, like in drone operated warfare. It opens up, the sensory feedback opens up the ability of haptic user interfaces where you can touch and feel a menu to rely on both on maybe a visual display and a touch oriented display. I mean, the more that we can pare down the cognitive burden of our technologies, which we aim to do, the more seamless it becomes. It almost becomes easier to use than a physical hand. It responds faster.
And if I could add to that really quick, I would just say that, if we think about like what the body naturally does, right? It's like this idea starts in our brain as this electrical signal. It starts to travel down through our nerves. And then what happens is our nerves, before it transitions to our muscles, there's actually like a chemical like transition, right? Mm-hmm. And so this electrical signal has to then go from a electrical signal to a chemical signal. Then that causes the muscles to create another electrical signal. signal, which then starts to pull on the tendons, which actually makes your physical movement. And there's like inertia and all these other things that slow that process down. So when we tap into the nerves, we actually bypass that chemical process. We bypass the muscles altogether. We bypass the tendons and we bypass the physical movement of the joints. So we're replacing all of this portion that is, of the biological process that takes time. And what we're replacing it with is basically a wired transmission or wireless transmission to a computer, and then that computer runs an AI algorithm. And what Chris is describing, that 4 milliseconds, that's the process, that's the time it takes us to take that electrical signal from the nerve and convert it into a digital signal that can be, sent out to any device. And so that's it much faster than the biological process that would have taken place because we're bypassing some of these slower things, predominantly that chemical transition between a nerve and a muscle.
So does that mean you could be faster than human movement is?
Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, that's
Absolutely.
the example I love to give is like, we're talking about shaving off like, milliseconds, right? And when you think about like, oh, a millisecond, that's so small, like, like how much are we really gaining here? But like a millisecond is massive in the time scale of like reaction times, right? Where we're talking about a person, an Air Force pilot, in a dogfight situation who's responding in like, fractions of seconds, millisecond timing before life or death situations, right? And if you can just speed that process up by just a small amount, that's life or death. That's game changing type. And in these combat situations, I think that's where you'll start to see these really big benefits. But even on like, the real world situation where, a person is controlling a prosthesis, typing at a computer or, doing activities of daily living, shaving off that latency and making it so that it's more seamless and more intuitive is what actually allows people to continue to use a prosthesis because it's easy to use, it's fast, it's responsive. We've all sat there and watched a video buffer and it just like lags and lags and we just immediately stop watching. Like, I'm not going to do that. And if you think about a prosthesis that lags and is slow and takes time, like, of course, no one's going to use it. So as we speed it up and make it, as fast or faster than what people could do previously, right? And now all of a sudden you're really recreating that capability that allows people to do the things that they love.
That speed concept is so fascinating to me. So I've read a little bit about exoskeletons and how the military doesn't use it right now. Is that mostly due to that lag? Is it that speed the primary reason of why it's not used as much?
Yes, yeah, they don't provide naturalistic quick feedback, and the delay makes one reconsider at a very basic neurological level what they intend to do in that latency period. I looked this up earlier, but if you imagine two opposing forces, right, both with rifles, and if one is able to access faster than human performance pulling a trigger, a bullet travels about 25 feet a second or 25 feet in a millisecond. So it would, I mean, it's hundreds of feet. It's hundreds of feet to thousands of feet, depending on your latency, compared to a normal human in the loop chain. And as we progress, it just like quantity, just like rapid financial trading, the faster that we can reduce that latency period, the more of a competitive advantage we'll have in all spheres. Um, Exoskeletons, it's clear that they deliver a power advantage. It's clear that they deliver an endurance advantage. It's unclear right now if they deliver real world performance, and we know that that's achievable with improved latency and dexterity, which is a derivative of latency. Would you agree, Jake?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the opportunity to extend capabilities is what I think is most promising. So I can just give a quick little anecdote and maybe a little bit of a tangent here. But I think one of the things that's really unique that we've seen is the ability to like augment capabilities beyond what would normally be capable. And by that, to break that down into like a concrete thing, we actually had a project we were working on with DARPA, so the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, where we had an individual who had, this type of implanted system And normally, what we're trying to do with our implanted system is restore a sense of touch, right? So we're trying to just make a person feel a normal sensation on their missing limb. But DARPA came to us with this idea and basically said, well, like, what if we wanted to give them some other type of information? And we were like, oh, well, what do you mean? So we took a prosthesis, and instead of having pressure sensors to detect forces, we put infrared sensors to allow it to detect proximity. And so what that meant is we were sending signals back up to the brain that were not pressure, but were proximity. And so we like truly created like this spider sense that a person could wave their hand in front of objects and detect if it was close or far, and they could feel that in a natural way. And so now when I think about like what exoskeletons could look like in the future, is that they're not just going to be, you know, a faster extension of ourselves, but they're going to allow us to do all these cool new things. It's like the goggles that allow you to see night sight, right? And now you can see in the dark. But imagine an exoskeleton that has this spider sense, or an exoskeleton that can, you know, make you operate at different scales that you were never able to do before. So I think that this technology is really going to unlock a lot of ways to augment warfighter capabilities, and just in general, all of us.
We only have about 2 minutes left, so really quickly, Jake, you know, you brought up a really interesting question in my mind, which is how are you guys working with the DoD and the VA? Because there's a lot of overlap with Defense Department and veterans and so forth.
Yeah, so we've been working with the DoD from a long time now. You know, it started with some of the congressionally directed medical research program, which started with, you know, spinal cord restoration. And then DARPA came in, and DARPA came in with this idea of like, can you flip the script, and instead of, you know, reanimating a paralyzed individual, can you give sensations back to individuals who've lost a limb for the country? And so we started working on that. And now we're kind of moving back into this space of exploring partnerships with NIH and other areas as well, but also looking at, you know, ARPA-H and other programs of this nature. But, you know, the DoD, through a variety of different areas, has really been kind of like pioneering this technology and making it possible for us to move in all these different directions. Does that answer your question, Wendy, or do you have any other specific?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. You know, one final question for each of you before we head out. And I always like to think about, you know, the experiences of how we got to where we are today. What would you say is the most memorable moment for each of you over the past decade and a half of doing this research? Let's start with you, Jake.
Sure. I would say it's always the patient interactions that we're working on. You know, it's like the videos I showed those because I think those are some of the most powerful and most inspiring moments that remind us why we're doing what we're doing. And when we work with a patient and you see that tear in their eyes as with this massive smile on their face as they're touching and just doing something that you wouldn't necessarily, you know, imagine, like a patient who sits there and strokes a door because it's just so cool to feel it. Or we had one patient who just held the phone in their hand for just multiple minutes to the point that we as researchers thought that the hand was broken. We were like, what's going on? Why aren't you just letting go of the phone? Like, is it stuck? And they were like, no, no, no. I just enjoy feeling the phone. Like I haven't felt anything in my hand for this long. And it's just so cool. And so those types of emotion and those types of reactions that we see are just so inspiring and just really make us, you know, continue doing what we're doing and really just make us think of all these cool possibilities for what's next.
All right. I would love to tag on to this. You know, we're moving on to our ninth implanted subject. We've had 8 successful implanted subjects, and all these patients come from different walks of life. Like we talked about, you know, we've worked with farmers, we've worked with bishops, we've worked with veterans, we've worked with hairdressers, and you know, from all across the country, from Utah to California to to Louisiana to Mississippi. We have people engaging with us from all over the United States, and they're currently, you know, still emailing us wanting to get enrolled. Um, my most memorable effort was when I was visiting Perry Pesarossi in Louisiana at his home. We were recording what was possible. We had some predetermined tasks like use a screwdriver or feed yourself, you know, which are kind of basic ways of using a tool. And so, you know, I framed it like we were looking at a person using a tool, but in the middle of it, his dog approached him tapped him on the leg like he needed to go outside. And Perry turned around effortlessly, opened the door, twisted the knob, walked outside, and reached out and grabbed the ball without thinking about it. And that is the win that we're looking for. Naturalistic use, no extra effort, using it like a real hand. So there we are.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Really, thank you for everyone's time. We are super excited to share this research. If anyone has additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. But definitely, we would love and need congressional funding to bring this to market. And with funding over the next few years, it'd be incredible to realize some of these benefits with soldiers, with wounded warfighters, and exoskeletons and so forth that Jake and Chris have talked about today. So thank you, and we will talk to you all soon again. Thank you very much.